Hello, good morning. So I'm just working on this guy again. Having a break from the face, and I am just coming down to work on the body and the neck. Just get it sort of all blocked in. There's a lot I don't like about the face at the moment, so I'm just going to leave that for now. I'm going to work on the body, get his hair done, his beard, and then I can come back to the face and spend a lot more time on that without having to worry about doing other bits as well. So I'm just starting with a medium tone, which was the base colour, and then I'm just going to go over and add in the highlights, then I'll add in the darker areas, and then I'll just start blending between the two. So this is just really quick, just going in, just roughing it out. Not doing anything exact just yet. This is just to get an idea. Yeah, morning. It's been quite toasty, hasn't it? It's been lovely though. It was nice having a bank holiday off yesterday. This is the MobileStudioPro 16. So it's the 16-inch one. You can get a version which is 13 inches, which is slightly smaller. But I quite like the bigger screen on this. At some point I'd love to have a play around with the new Cintiq Pro 24, or maybe even the 32, just to see what they're like. I do have the 27Q HD, and that is lovely and big and really nice to work on. But I would like to try one of the newer Cintiqs, because the MobileStudioPro is a lot nicer to draw on than the 27Q HD. So if the new Cintiq Pros have got the same technology, then they would just be amazing to draw on. But yeah, anyway, this is the MobileStudioPro 16. So yeah, so I'm just roughing out the body at the moment, just getting in the basic highlights. And I know this highlight colour isn't right for this part of the body because we want it to be more blue, like the background. But I can add that in later. I think somebody asked how come how do I manage to get a lot of detail in but also make it look good from far away, and that's basically because I always work with this navigator open, so no matter how close up I'm working like this, I don't get sort of fixated on the top smaller details. I'm always referring back to this so I can see what the thing looks like as a whole. So feel free to fire over any questions if you've got any. Hi Carl, how's it going? I don't really use blend modes that much. I work on the face, and that gives me sort of all the base colours, and then I can use that to work on the rest of it. I do use blending modes. I use the colour blending mode most of all if I am, if I want to change, if I want to add more blue into it, I just add a colour blending mode, add blue, and then I can play around with it. Thanks, Colin. Just trying out these live feeds, Col. Not sure. I don't know if you've ever done any of them. It's quite nice to have the interaction. Right, I've lost what I was doing now. I have to say, it is different doing a male portrait rather than a female. There are bits of it that I'm sort of struggling with. Like I say, I'm just not happy with the face, but I'm just going to come back to that later. I'm just going to put it off and put it off and put it off. Yeah, it is really nice to paint on. Because of the etched glass, it does feel like you're sort of drawing on paper. You get that sort of friction and that feedback. I do much prefer painting on this to the iPad, and I even prefer painting on this to the 27Q HD. Although I do keep telling myself I need to jump back on the iPad, just because it's a lot more flexible. And I do like the fact that Procreate does the time lapses for you. Yeah, the iPad can be too glossy and too shiny, especially if you're trying to work outside. you just get non-stop reflections, so I can't really work outside with the iPad. You do get reflections on this as well, but they're not as obvious. They're sort of dulled down. This is just Photoshop. I would like to try something different. I see that Sketchbook is now free from Autodesk, so I've been thinking of downloading that and giving that a go. I think they only made it free last week. Don't know if any of you have used Sketchbook for painting. So you see, I started off with this, which is just the base colour. And then I just started roughing in some highlights. Now I'm going in with a darker shade and working in the shadows. You know, it's just all very rough at the moment, and then you start off big and rough, and then you start working in and refining and getting smaller and smaller details. I mean, on here, it's starting to look okay, but on here, I know that there's a lot more to do on it. But, you know, I've only been working on it for half an hour, so it's got plenty of time yet. Right, I didn't realise that about Sketchbook. Oh, thanks for the tip. I might just stick with Photoshop then. Unless anybody can recommend any other good painting apps that I could try. One other thing about this as well is the skin tones aren't right yet, but I can fix those later. Oh, Coral Painter, yeah, that's one I've heard of as well. Hey, thanks, Franco. One thing I'd love to be able to do is, you see these artists who paint portraits and they just, you know, do them really quickly, but every paint stroke is exactly where it needs to be. I would love to get to a stage to sort of speed up and be like that, but at the moment I don't think I can get my head around that, because I'm too much of a perfectionist. I like to go in and everything to be exact. That's probably why these portraits take so long and they're so detailed. Hi. Feel free to ask any questions or anything. That's what I've got the live stream open for. So now I've got those rough shades in, I can get rid of the sketch. Got them all blocked in. Hi. Thanks, glad you like it. A lot of people find it a bit too weird or a bit too creepy, but it's nice to hear when people like my style. Although it's still a developing style, really. I keep wanting to do something that's a lot more stylized, but we'll see. At the end of the day, I'm not making any money out of this. It's all just working on this in my spare time, just trying to improve my skills. It would be nice to get to a point where I'm making money from doing this artwork, but for now I'm just happy. Well, it's kind of like a hobby at the moment. So because I've done the face first and I've got all the main colours in that, rather than fiddle about with the palette trying to pick colours, I can just move up here, pick a colour from the face, move down here and start implementing it into the body. So now I've got all that roughly blocked in, I can then go in and I'm going to now start working in some of the finer details. And I need to clean up the edges because they were just blocked in as well. I'm just noticing this sort of muscle area here isn't right, so I'm just going to go to use the old liquify tool. And this is what I miss from apps like Procreate. You don't get this sort of liquify tool. It's great for just, I know that's wrong, but rather than erase it and then redo it, I can just pull it around using this, pull it into the right position and the right shape. So that's a bit better. Oh, hi Daria. Well, thanks, but I think you just need to practice. That's all I'm doing. I'm not at the level that I'd like to be at, but I don't think when you're an artist you ever are. You're always sort of learning and you're always progressing. So I would say just practice and practice and practice. But don't try and practice too much to the point where you feel like it's becoming a chore. Set aside maybe half an hour a day, take a sketchbook out with you, and just do scribbles, just draw. Just so long as you're drawing something, it doesn't matter what, that's you practicing. And then once you're a lot more comfortable with your sketching, then you can move on and maybe start working in Procreate on the iPad, or Photoshop on the PC or something like that. It's all about setting yourself realistic goals and realistic stages. Don't try and jump straight in to doing a full colour portrait, because all that'll happen is you won't be happy with the results and you'll scare yourself that much that you just won't want to do it anymore. It's taken me, I think I've always been drawing since I was young, but when I got into 3D, I then just found that I stopped drawing completely because I was using a computer to create the artwork. And it was only maybe a few years ago that I really sat down and said, right, I need to get back into drawing and painting. So I did exactly that. If you're following me on, because I'm doing the Wacom takeover, I'm going to put a post about this on tomorrow. I think I've got that planned for. Yeah, I started by doing gesture drawings. So it's based. If you don't know what gesture drawings are, they're just quick sketches. Let me just save this before I start scribbling all over it. So gesture drawings, they're timed poses where you get 30 seconds to get the basic pose in. And there are plenty of websites which generate them for you. I can post some links and things if it's useful. But basically they flash up for 30 seconds and you're just... Oh, hang on. Just get my brush a bit bigger. So yeah, the poses just flash up and you've got 30 seconds to sort of... Right, I'm just gonna... No, my smoothing's too high, so it's making everything... So yeah, you've got 30 seconds, so you say, all right, so there's the head, there's the body, and then you block out the legs. And then after 30 seconds, it flips to another picture. So then you've got to, oh right, I've got to move on. And that helps you improve your speed and your observation skills. And then after I'd done that for a while, I then moved on and I got a sketchbook and I got some photos, just on Pinterest or off Google. Just find photos of anything. Set yourself sort of maybe a theme for that week. Maybe it's anatomy, maybe it's comic art, maybe it's dogs, cats, whatever. Just spend an hour a day with a sketchbook, just drawing anything like that. And then when you're comfortable sketching in a sketchbook, as my example, I then moved on to the iPad. And I used Adobe Draw, which is more like a sketchbook, but a digital sketchbook. And then I just sketched in that just to get me used to drawing digitally and getting more comfortable with just black and white. And then I just progressed from there to doing colour. But when I started doing these sorts of portraits, when I was working on MobileStudioPro, I found that colour was a bit too intimidating. So what I used to do was I just painted in black and white first, and then I applied the colour after, because that way I could focus on the details, the light, the shadows and things like that without having to think about skin tones, and then added the colour after. And then I did that for a year, and it's only just now that I'm at the stage where I'm comfortable enough to think, right, I'm just going to start painting completely in colour. So it's not something that happens overnight. You just sort of have to build up to it, but you have to be prepared to practice a lot. And I'm still practicing now. I'm, like I say, what I'm doing now, this guy, I do a lot of the female portraits because I think that's in my comfort zone, because I'm comfortable doing them. So I quite like to push myself a bit and do portraits like this man. I've never done anybody with a darker skin and a man. And I also wanted to get a bit more of his body in, just so I could do some more of the muscle work. So I probably rambled on a bit there, sorry about that. Oh, right, I see. Well, to be fair, when I started out, and this is back in 1994, that's when I started working in the games industry. Before then I went to college and I knew I wanted to work with computers, but there wasn't any computer courses, and there wasn't any there were art courses, but there weren't digital art courses. So all I did was in my spare time, I had an Amiga with Deluxe Paint, and I would create my own game artwork, and then luckily enough a job came up, and because I'd spent all the time practicing doing game artwork, I submitted my work and I got a job. But I think I think because there aren't any digital art classes doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. You just have to be a bit more proactive and maybe do it yourself, you know, just practice. Like I do with this in the morning, I start working about half an hour or so. So I always say, right, in the morning, I know I'm not going to get disturbed, so I'll do half an hour of painting, and then I go do my day job. You know, if I can fit in a little bit more painting in my lunch break, then I'll do that. You just have to sort of fit it in when you can and just practice and practice. I know that's what everybody says, you need to practice, but it's true in a way. You're not going to improve unless you practice. Right. So, let me think. Yeah, sure, I'll check it out. Right, let's have a look. Yeah, I think Photoshop can be scary, but I think you just need to dive in and start playing around with it. If you're not sure, watch some tutorials on YouTube, or I can help. You know, I think the best thing to do is if an application seems intimidating, just jump in and just start. It doesn't matter what you're drawing in it, just doodle, sketch, anything just to build up your confidence. That's all I did, because I used Photoshop for game art, but it was more for creating texture maps and tweaking texture maps. I never really did any proper drawing in it. And I think that's because it probably scared me a little bit. But it's just about building confidence, so I would just say just dive in. Just having a look at the other comments. Yeah, the issue with the pen scrolling, if you look on Wacom's Facebook page or Twitter page, or there was a bug with a Windows update. I don't know the exact steps to fixing it, so you may have to just Google it online, but it is a known bug, and I did have the same problem, but there is a fix out there if you just look for it. Tracy Sun, I've always used a Wacom tablet. There were more ones that were bought for us when I worked in a studio, and it wasn't the Cintiqs, it was more the sort of the Intuos ones, you know, the ones where you draw flat on the table while you're looking at the screen. But personally, I bought myself a 27 QHD a few years ago, and I used that. But then for the painting, mainly for the painting, I started off with the iPad Pro, and then progressed to the MobileStudioPro. And I use the MobileStudioPro just because it's so nice to paint on. It's a lot more relaxing in a way. But then that's probably more down to what I'm used to. No, I don't tend to do any 3D paint over. This is all just hand painted from scratch. I just find it easier and quicker just to paint it all rather than build it in 3D, render it out, and then paint over it. I know I could probably do that because I do use a lot of 3D apps, but I think because I wanted to learn and get better at painting, I just wanted to do it all from start to finish, and have it be hand painted. it's all right doing these live feeds, but I sort of lose my train of thought and I forget where I was, what I was doing. But I think the whole point of these live feeds is to, you know, have a bit of a conversation with you guys and answer your questions and demonstrate anything that you want to see, basically. Right, so now I need a bit more of this colour. And again, I'm still just blocking out this torso. It's still very rough. And that's why I'm just using this soft brush to start off with. So is anybody sort of following my Wacom takeover over on their page? Has anybody come from there? Has anybody started following me that saw my first post over there? I'm going to add this live feed to my story as well, just so it'll be up there for 24 hours if anybody wants to look back over on it. I'm probably going to have to finish shortly. Oh, that's great to hear, Daria. I'd love to see some of the stuff that you end up painting. And definitely come back and let me know if you have any more questions or anything. I'm more than happy to help. Trying to get a bit quicker with my painting. I think my problem is it just looks messy and then I end up going in and adjusting stuff. I did do a live feed last week and I thought, oh, I'll upload it to YouTube as well. But because I had the radio on in the background, I just got inundated with emails saying copyrighted material and all sorts of stuff. So I ended up just not uploading it. So at the moment I'm doing this live feed, and if it goes all right, I'll put this on YouTube, but I've just got no music or anything on in the background. So that's probably why I'm talking a bit too much. So when I've got the basic shades blocked in, I can then go in and just start to refine areas. So like the spine here, it does need to be more blue. So I'm going to pick the background, because if you've got a background colour defined, it's good to pull that in to your portrait. It just ties everything together. And then I'm just going to use a sharper brush on another layer. And then I can just start working on sharpening up that spine. Now I've got the basics blocked in. Probably needs to be a bit paler. Hi to anybody new that's joined. feel free to ask any questions or anything. I'll just quickly explain what I'm doing. I'm carrying on working on this guy, but there's just something about the face that I just don't like. Excuse me. So rather than scrap it, I'm just going to focus on the other areas of him. Like at the moment, I'm working on his torso. So I'm just going to distract myself with finishing off the other areas. So I'll do his body. He's got a lot more hair to do, and his beard. So those bits I'm more comfortable working on. So I'll get those done and out of the way. Then I can come back to the face, and then I'll work on that some more. So that's sort of my coping mechanism. When I'm working on something and I'm not quite happy with it, I'll focus on another area, and then I can come back to it later. And also sometimes if you're working on the face and you don't have the hair and everything in, the face won't look right until you've added the hair and the beard and things. So sometimes you have to have a break and work on another area to help balance out the whole scene. So that's all I'm doing now. I started off with basic sort of mid-tone. Sorry, just waving to people. Basic mid-tone, then just started to really block in just some really quick highlights, shadows, some basic tones, and now I'm just starting to go in with a harder brush and just sort of, define some of the details. So at the moment I'm just started working on the spine. So I will add this to my story and possibly upload it to YouTube as well. So you see, just adding that line there, it's just really helped that spine pop. So now I've got that line in, I can go in with a softer brush again and just sort of blend that in. So with the phone, I keep wanting to lean over the tablet, but because the phone's recording, I'm sort of having to sit back a bit, so it's a bit awkward, but it's fine. So I'm just going to add another layer there just because I'm not that comfortable. Just going to add a little bit of a blend. And I know up here we need the light to come round a bit, so and I know I've gone over that line there, but the way I normally work is I just put the colour down and then I use the eraser and just take it away. So like this, I can just soften that there just by removing it, soften that there, and then go in and bring back that harder line. Like that. So we've got a subtle sort of blend. Go away, keyboard. And if I feel like it's too much, I can just drop the opacity. I think it's just a lot of experimentation. I don't find that, I mean, yeah, there's some techniques that I work with now that I use all the time, but I think like with anything, it's just, you try something, and if it doesn't work, you just try something else until you find something that works for you or for that particular piece you're working on. So there's like a little gap around here, so I'm just going to solidify that. It's a bit thick now, but a bit thick, but then I can just go in and just remove what I don't want. I'm looking at it here on the navigator, and I can tell that it's too bright. So let's just merge that down. And I can always drop the opacity a little bit. Can go in and just start working on some of the other highlight areas. So yeah, that's starting to come together. Now I'm starting to add those harder lines in. And then we can do the same on it over here. It's by no means finished. There's a lot more I want to do on it, but it's just starting to look a lot more interesting. So again, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire them over. I'm more than happy to try and answer them. I'll probably be on for, don't know, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll call it a day. So Hi, welcome. I've recently just gone through and sorted out my brushes because I had a lot that I used. Well, I had a lot that were there but I didn't use. Primarily, the one I use most often is, I don't know if you can see this, but it's just a soft, I can't remember where I got it from. It's a soft speckled brush. If I just get rid of those, let me just save. Just add another layer, just so you can see what it does. Basically, it's just like a soft airbrush. I don't know if you can, you probably can't see, but basically it's an airbrush. I'm gonna try making it bigger. But it's got a sort of a graininess to it, which is quite good. I quite like that, and I use that more than anything. I've then got this a harder brush that I use for if I'm working on areas, you know, sort of where there's a crease or something. So I've just then got that hard brush there, and what I tend to do is just I paint with that, then I use a softer brush to blend it in, and then I use the eraser again with that softer brush just to smooth it out. So they're my favourite ones, and then I've got one that's a hard brush that's tapered, and I use that for sort of my main lines. But when I'm sort of sketching, I've got sort of a pencil brush and then a fine line brush. So you've got a fine line brush there. I've got a pencil brush. That's good for just general sketching. And then I've got sort of a thicker, sort of hard brush. And they're the ones that I use the most. I don't really use any others. I've got brushes for hair. I've got textures down here for skin textures and things, which I do use later on. Like here on his face, you can see this graininess. I'm just starting to experiment with getting some sort of skin variation in there, just so it's not all super smooth and soft. One of these layers has that skin on. I'll just see if I can get rid of it. Where is it? I really need to start naming my layers. There we go. So there's that one and that one. So you see how soft the skin is there. I just use this texture just to try and add a bit of variety to it. I think it's probably a bit too much at the moment, but I'm just experimenting with that at the moment. But they're the main brushes that I use. I've experimented with a lot of others, and I don't really use a lot of the others. But I guess it comes down to your own techniques, what you want to do with it, how you paint. This is just the way I'm comfortable painting, so. I do try and experiment with other brushes, just to see if I can sort of bring them into my workflow, and I think it's important to do that. I've tried various hair brushes, but I don't know, I haven't found one that I like yet, so I end up doing hair sort of a strand at a time, just so I've got a bit more control. So back onto this, let's blocking in some highlights, then I just need to use the eraser, just soften them back a bit. Like this bit here needs to be hard around the front because there's more of a crease where the muscle is. And then just soften this in. How do I draw hair? I probably can't demonstrate it now because the live feed's gonna finish soon. But I can always do a live feed maybe one morning this week, and I will try and focus on hair, just show people how I do the hair. If you'd like. But again, I'm still learning, so the way I approach hair, I'm still experimenting with. But at the moment it kind of works for me, but it may not work for everybody. So I'm just softening these highlights here. So yeah, still a lot to do on that torso, but we've not done bad this morning. Started off with this, started to block in some of the highlights and shadows, and then I've just been adding in some of the sharper highlights just to help define the muscles and the spine. But yeah, still a lot more to do on that, but my time is up. Need to go to work, so I'm going to leave it there for today. Okay, one last question. This is the MobileStudioPro 16. Really nice device for painting on. You get a really good... it does feel like you're drawing on paper, pencil on paper view. It's just very nice to paint on. I do prefer it to the iPad Pro, but that's just a personal taste. But saying that, I do still use the iPad Pro quite a lot. But yeah, this is a MobileStudioPro 16. Oh, thanks Daria, I'm glad the tips help. Like I say, I'm no way a professional, but I'd like to think if I've learned something and it's useful to somebody else, then that's great. Right, I think that's it. I'm going to end this for today. I'll try and do some more live feeds throughout the rest of the week, so keep an eye out for me to pop on. And I may do a day where I just do a live feed of requests. I get a lot of requests for certain things like how to blend the skin in, how to paint hair, how to do eyes, things like that. So I may just do a day where I'm doing where I do that. If you're working on Sketchbook Pro, I've not really used Sketchbook Pro. I've dabbled with it a little bit on an iPad, but I haven't used it yet on the MobileStudioPro. Somebody was saying earlier though that if you use, the difference is with Sketchbook Pro is no matter how big your canvas is, it can look quite pixelated. But I'm going to download it now it's free and give it a play, see what I think. Maybe when I've done this portrait and the female one that I'm working on at the moment as well, I'll maybe give it a dabble. Right, I'm going to have to go. Thanks everybody for watching and all of your questions, and I'll probably, like I say, I'll probably try and do another live feed at some point later in the week.